Picture a medieval knight, battle-weary and exhausted, sitting on a rocky beach. Across from him sits Death himself, draped in a black cloak, locked in a game of chess. It is an image that establishes Ingmar Bergman as a filmmaker who tackled existential dread with cold, surgical precision. Yet, the man who defined modern filmmaking harbored an internal contradiction. He considered the theater his loyal wife, and the cinema merely his expensive mistress. Understanding his power requires looking past the plot. To see how he actually worked, we have to deconstruct the literal, physical frame of his films. His aesthetic is a calculated formula built by stacking three distinct layers: the theatrical interface, the expressionist lens, and the acoustic takeover. Bergman's roots in puppet theater cultivated a lifelong skepticism of cheap cinematic showmanship. He stripped his productions down, removing the fluff to focus entirely on the raw performance of the actor. He imported the intense, claustrophobic intimacy of August Strindberg's chamber plays directly into his cinematic staging. He utilized highly specific blocking, often placing non-speaking actors in the background. These silent observers linger in the frame, amplifying the psychological tension without saying a single word. He believed the human face was the ultimate landscape. Rather than relying on sweeping action shots, he used lingering close-ups to map out a character's internal state. By weaponizing stage intimacy on screen, Bergman forced the audience into a direct, uncomfortable confrontation with the human soul. But focusing on faces alone presents a filmmaking problem. How do you photograph invisible internal conditions like emotional isolation and sexual anguish? The solution arrived through his critical collaborator, cinematographer Gunnar Fischer. Fischer utilized a stark, black-and-white expressionist lighting style defined by heavy, brilliant contrasts. By manipulating brittle twilights and sparkling sunlight, Fischer mapped invisible psychological burdens directly onto the characters' physical environments. Fischer's lens transformed the physical screen into a psychological X-ray of the characters' internal emotional states. When lighting and acting failed to convey enough pain, Bergman operated as an acoustic auteur, deploying sound with surgical precision. He relied on transformative film musical moments, specific audio shifts triggered exactly when a character experiences a severe emotional breakdown. This diagram shows how the mechanics of this technique work. A complex track of natural noise suddenly flatlines to zero. Then a jarring, modernistic original music score spikes to fill that dead space, effectively reverting the movie back to a silent film aesthetic. The prologue of his 1966 film Persona executes this audio-visual shock by blending silent film trauma with a haunting atonal score. By destroying the scene's realistic audio, Bergman traps the viewer directly inside the character's panicked breakdown, eliminating any possibility of intellectual escape. When you watch his most famous sequences, you are watching all three layers operating simultaneously: the claustrophobic stage blocking, Fischer's crushing shadows, and the sudden, disorienting acoustic disruptions. This cross-pollination of theater, visual art, and music codified a cinematic language capable of looking strictly inward. This achievement is deeply rooted in the stark, isolated environments of Fårö, where Bergman filmed and dreamed. It executes his core philosophy, a belief he held above all else, that art must ultimately serve as man's interface with man. The next time you watch a Bergman film, pay attention to the formula. So look for the stark light, listen to the deliberate silence, and interface directly